magic in the air, wands all around us, cast away our care. Friends in the hallways, adventures we find, spells and enchantments, trouble on our mind. That's always before, life is a spell we know. We're casting joy and glow, that's a wizard show. Mischief in the classroom, potions gone astray, flying through the quad now bright.
RPG Pundit asks, was 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons a failure or a success? Let's get into that because I said I would. Also, apparently I can do banners now. I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently I can do it. I don't know if it really adds anything, but it's a thing now. Was 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons ultimately a failure now as we are experiencing the birthing pains of 6th edition? I have mixed feelings about anything that comes out of Pundit's mouth. Sometimes I support everything he says. Other times I don't. He's definitely controversial, that's for sure. But he does ask an interesting question. Since Wizards of the Coast has informed us in not so many words that, 5th edition is dead. But it's backwards compatible. No, it isn't. And Jeremy Crawford, whether he admits it or not, did say it was a brand new edition. And since Wizards of the Coast mentality is that of a goldfish, they would like us to forget anything that they made before last week. All the past 10 years, never happened. So, success or failure? Financially, was it a success? Well, let's check the numbers. According to my stock broker, because I still have one share of Hasbro, today Hasbro stock is at $74.02. That's down at almost an entire dollar from where it was a year ago. Success or failure? I would say, well, I just lost $1, so that's a failure. Now let's look at the Q2 quarterly report that went out July 25th of 2024. Hasbro revenue declined 18%, driven primarily by the E1 disaster. Wizards of the Coast and digital gaming declined that by showing a negative 20% and entertainment a negative 90%. Operating profit of Q2 was $222 million, which is an operating margin of $23.3 million, which includes the $37 million of intangible automation associated with the loss of E1. Now, if you remember correctly, in Q1, Wizards of the Coast informed us that they'd somehow magically lost $1 billion. $1 billion. How do you lose $1 billion? And one of the main financial goals of 2025 was to make that $1 billion back by the time Q2 rolled around, because you owed us, the stockholders, $1 billion. Now, obviously, you don't owe each of us $1 billion, but I have a small percentage of that $1 billion that I expect Wizards of the Coast to pay me back. According to the quarterly reports, nope, that's not happening in Q2, maybe in Q3. But in continuing the was it a failure, Wizards of the Coast would like us to know that the 2024 6th edition Player's Handbook is the fastest selling D&D book ever, selling 3 times as many as the 2014 version. Is this true? Does this mean that 5e was a failure? Or does this mean that Wizards of the Coast played some shenanigans with the 6th edition Player's Handbook that they didn't play with the 5th edition Player's Handbook all those years before? Now, if you're comparing 5e sales in 2014 through Pathfinder 2014, yeah, that's absolutely true, because 5e didn't pick up steam until 2015. 2014 was 5e's let's test the waters year. It didn't really get rolling into 2015. They played their cards very close to their chest for the first year to see how people would react, because they were coming out of one of the worst publicized year they've ever had up till, well, recently, till 2023. But before 2023, 2013, all the way back to when 4E came out, Wizards of the Coast couldn't hit a fish in a barrel. So when 5E did get released, they wanted us to completely forget 4E, and they played it for a year very close to the chest. So to say that, oh, well, the D&D 6E Player's Handbook sold more than the D&D's 5E Player's Handbook, well, that's true. But let's not also forget that there were some shenanigans involved. First, they're comparing it to the year one sales, which we already went through. Two, let's not forget that they made 3,000 copies available at Gen Con weeks before it ever hit the shelves. And despite the fact that apparently Stephen Glicker bought like 80,000 of those, I love you, Stephen, it was a success. I mean, they pretty much sold out. So that's 3,000 people that got the Player's Handbook ahead of time, showing a significant profit in the amount sold. And then, of course, we knew that the friendly local game stores had the physical copies before the big box stores did, and were avoiding street date, because I had people sending me emails and texts telling me they'd got it, even though technically it wasn't available yet. And then, of course, it hit the shelves at all your big box. But didn't a lot of people who pre-ordered it get told they couldn't receive it because apparently their money, I don't know, somehow you don't have enough funds to buy this book? Well, I had enough funds to get the digital. My bank is showing I have the funds. What do you mean I don't have enough funds? And it wasn't just one person. It was a couple dozens of people who said, apparently Wizards of the Coast thinks I don't have money. They gave me the digital copy, but they're not giving me the physical copy, so I have to go through the whole thing again. Oh, by the way, there's a errata for the physical copy, so you also got to go onto D&D Beyond and download the errata, or wait till we release another Player's Handbook, which has the new errata in it. 6E.1. Wait, doesn't it say on the Wizards of the Coast calendar, Dungeons and Dragons 6EX June 2027? Weird. So financially, was it a success? Well, it started out as a success, but it ended in a failure. Now, between 2018 through 2023, D&D and Wizards saw the highest amount of money it had ever made, ever. It was making Wizards of the Coast $1 billion, which is why Hasbro decided to say, well, now you have to make us $1 billion every year. And if you don't, well, stuff might happen. I don't know. It's like, they said that they were going to do stuff in 2020, and pretty much everything they said they were going to do, they've done, whether openly or sneakily behind their backs. But, it's like they said, okay, well, we're seeing that you made us $1 billion in 2019. We see you made us $1 billion in 2018. You see, we're making us ton of money here in the middle of 2020. We expect you to make us $1 billion every year. So obviously, in that case, 5e was a success. It was making Wizards $1 billion. Not like anything else was happening in the world between 2018 and 2023 that would maybe make more people buy D&D, right? That totally happened in a vacuum, right? Wizards of the Coast would have you believe that. Of course, Wizards of the Coast now also wants to deny 5e ever happened. So therefore, they can say things about 6e. Sure, 5e was a failure. Look how successful 6e is. I'm doing my car salesman face, but you can't see it. But yeah. So financially, I would say started out not a success, became a huge success, but ends up, as we know, $1 billion in the hole, which they still haven't recompensed. And they're blaming that on the sale of E1. And they're claiming any success they have financially is because of digital and Wizards. Well, what they're really saying is any success we've had over the past 2 years is digital. Wizards just happens to be part of the same company because, we restructured it. So anytime Wizards fails, that entire department fails. But every time digital online Monopoly Go succeeds. Oh, look how much money Magic the Gathering made. Closing argument, I would say financially, 5e did okay. Was it the most popular, successful ever? Well, yeah, but not because of 5e, because of other things that happened. And this is where we get to the big, important thing, because several things happened in a row to make 5th edition what it is. On its own, 5th edition would not have reached the levels of paradigm-shaking popularity had not this series of things happened here in the United States. And these are unique to the United States, obviously. The rest of the world did not have this thing, but the rest of the world felt the effects. But if we're talking Europe, Japan, South America, other countries, yeah, it's apples and oranges. D&D doesn't even compare to with the sales of games in other companies. D&D is only #1 in America, right? I know certain individuals would have you feel it's the entire world, but the numbers otherwise. But here in the US, several things happened that led to D&D 5e's success. Thing number one, Stranger Things. Stranger Things came out, right? And what is the very first episode of the kids in Stranger Things doing? They're playing D&D. Suddenly, Dungeons and Dragons 80s nostalgia is hit with an injection of adrenaline. Stranger Things, which has got Stephen Colbert and several other individuals coming forward and talking about their association with Dungeons and Dragons. Now, Stephen Colbert has been very open about his association with Dungeons and Dragons. He is a huge geek. There's a 20-sided dice hidden somewhere on every set that he's done. You just have to watch the Stephen Colbert show to see if you can find the 20-sided dice, but he hides them. He talks about it, that Anderson guy, D&D player, Deborah Ann Wool, D&D player, Joe Mangiola, D&D player. So all these celebrities are coming out and going, well, hey, I play D&D. I'm a founder and legend. Suddenly, D&D is once again in the pop culture. Not that D&D ever left pop culture. It's always been in the pop culture. But 80% of pop culture is D&D, right? But now it's getting mainstream media attention, which it hadn't gotten for a long time. And in the past, the mainstream media attention tended to be negative. I'm showing kittens because I always show kittens when I show things that I don't really have pictures for, right? Unless Steve's around. No, he's not. Okay. So kittens. You need to work on that background. That blue, I don't know. I got to figure out. So suddenly we have Stephen Colbert talking about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Suddenly we have Deborah Ann Wool copying on Dungeons & Dragons. Suddenly we have Stranger Things. Then another thing hits the world. Critical Role. Critical Role hits. And it explodes. It explodes in a way that is still unfathomable. But it just got so big, so fast. And then, of course, we had all the other people who wanted to be just like Critical Role. And despite the fact that for the hobby, in the long run, in the short run, suddenly D&D players were everywhere. And suddenly it was 5th edition. So that's number 2. We have Critical Role. We have Stranger Things. Number 3, Wizards of the Coast war against the culture of anything before 2014 5th edition for reasons. Well, I mean, if you follow the series of events, I guess kind of in the way everything Wizards of the Coast does makes sense in a weird, bizarre world kind of way. The suddenly jumping on the virtual signaling false narrative of everything before 2014 5e was bad kind of made sense because there was things going on in the world that they just multiplied 1,000-fold that got Dungeons and Dragons in the news. Look at all the positive things Wizards of the Coast 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is doing for the LGBTQ community, for the marginalized community, for the people of color community, you know, because up till anything before 2014 wasn't canon. It was evil. Gary Gygax was horrible. Every other D&D edition was awful. Anybody who played D&D before 2014 was horrible. And many of us suffered vicious, including myself, vicious attacks because of suddenly this stereotype that Wizards was forcing on the public media, and the public media embraced it. So 5e was a success because it suddenly had major television acknowledging it. It had major presence on Twitter, YouTube. It had hundreds of people who never before purchased or got into the hobby, suddenly getting in the hobby. It didn't matter whether they played it or not. People were spending money on 5e because they wanted to be cool. Suddenly D&D was cool again. So we have this boiling cauldron. And Wizards is seeing the profit for the boiling cauldron. Because even though it was more negative than positive, it was still, people were saying Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, and that was money in Wizards' pocket that they could then turn into something profitable. Then the fourth and most important thing happened. Now you can take each one of the previous things and look at them on their own, look at the series of events that led up to them, and say that going into 2019, 2020, Wizards was doing okay. Dungeons and Dragons 5e financially was doing okay. It was getting recognition from major media. Even my mom, probably your mom too. Everybody wanted to play 5e. Everybody wanted to be Matt Mercer. You couldn't walk 5 feet on the internet without running into another motherfucker trying to be Matt Mercer, looking at you, Mark Holmes. And then the virus. Bomb, bomb, bomb. Suddenly, we can't go to work. Suddenly, we can't go to school. Suddenly, we can't leave the house. Suddenly, an entire country grinds to a halt. Well, except, of course, it didn't, but, you know. Suddenly, we have a huge population of people with nothing to do and access to the internet, some of them for the very first time, and access to web cameras, some of them for the very first time, and access to Discord and Facebook and Twitter and Rumble and the Twitch and the Reddit. And we've got a lot of free time. And suddenly we've got a lot of people going, you know what I haven't done in a long time? Play D&D. And now I've got a lot of free time. Like 3 years worth of free time. I'm going to see if some of my friends want to play D&D. Oh, and look, there's other people playing D&D online suddenly. Wow. I'm going to sign up for this D&D Beyond thing because it's free. Snicker, snicker, snicker. And check out this whole digital, virtual D&D thing because I got nothing else to do. So now is a good time to run that epic campaign I've been working on for the past 15 years. Old fucks like me were playing D&D again. New people were playing D&D again because D&D was unbelievably popular and successful because we were trapped inside for 3 years. And Wizards of the Coast could do and say whatever they wanted, no matter how awful. What are you fucking going to do about it? You're still playing our game. Nobody else is doing as successful as we are. And everybody was trying to jump on that. You know, you had all these people trying to capture that 80 nostalgia thing with their game. Some succeeded, some failed, some Tales from the Loop. Didn't matter because I loved it anyways. But yeah, this was all just a bubbling cauldron that all was happening. And Wizards could do no wrong. It didn't matter what they released. Absolutely correct. Death Angle Shadow. Please like, please share, please subscribe. Thanks for dropping by. That was the precipice. Everything after Xanthars and Tasha's was the beginning of the end, with the whole canon, nothing existed, blah, 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 Jeremy Crawford. The second you put a camera in front of Jeremy Crawford, that was the beginning of the end. But yeah, for 3 years, Wizards of the Coast was a rock star. There was nothing Wizards of the Coast could do that could get them in trouble. Until the virus ended. And suddenly people were going back to work and back to school. And suddenly we had 3 years of built up frustration. And we started lashing out at each other, at new players, at old players, and Wizards of the Coast, in their internal optimistic stupidity and their ability to fail forward, tried to capitalize on that. We had the OSR versus the old school, the OSR versus the new players, the Sparkle Trolls versus the regular 5e players. We had everything that I've talked about for the past 2-3 years happening, which resulted in Wizards of the Coast getting more press. It didn't matter if it was negative press. It was press. People like myself were talking about Wizards of the Coast on a non-stop basis. Now, sure, you could publish 100 videos a day about how fucking awful Wizards of the Coast was. Didn't matter. They were still getting attention, and the algorithm still showed that we were talking about D&D. Success until 2023 and the OGL. And finally, that 10-year backup of Wizards of the Coast stupidity, which actually dates all the way back to 3.5, which was the beginning. I mean, it's not like Wizards of the Coast just started being stupid. 3.5 showed us how stupid they were. 4th edition definitely showed us how stupid they were. But then they dropped the OGL bomb in the early months of December 2023. Add that to 10 years of backed up sewage suddenly becoming available because we had people dropping leaks, and the progressive popularity suddenly explodes. The glass ceiling shadows. Wizards of the Coast has gone as far as they can go. They literally become their own enemy. Oh, we'll get into Perkins would be a whole separate topic, Death Angels, but you guys have all heard my theory on Perkins, right? I'm sure you have, right? And how unhappy he is working at Wizards. Look at Chris Perkins in an interview when he's sitting next to Jeremy Crawford in the last 2 years. Then look at Chris Perkins when he's running for the Acquisitions Incorporated guys. 2 completely separate people. Chris Perkins is miserable. It's physically obvious. I mean, the guy doesn't look healthy. That's separate subject. Back on track. Thanks for distracting me, Death Angel. So now suddenly Wizards is losing money. Wizards is hemorrhaging money. Wizards is hemorrhaging good press. How does Wizards decide to correct this fall from grace? Let's sell off our movie company that we bought for a lot of money and we're selling for significantly less. Let's continue to insult people who have access to the internet on a regular basis. And I don't know, let's send the Pinkerton detectives over to a guy's house to harass his wife and kids. So as we go into the end of 2023, nothing Wizards of the Coast can do can save them. They are a sinking ship. (2024) happens. How are we going to save this sinking ship? I don't know. Let's fire 1,000 employees. Let's lose $1 billion. Let's fuck up our movie. Let's fuck up every connection we have to major IPs like Power Rangers, Transformers, Dungeons and Dragons, and Star Wars. Let's just continue to be dumb. Let's allow Mackenzie DeArms to have access to a microphone. Let's have Kyle Brink have access to a microphone and say the stupid shit Kyle Brink said and say the stupid shit Mackenzie said. Let's let Connie Chang continue to be one of our shills. Let's announce fuck 5e. We're releasing 6a. Let's confuse the shit out of our fans by not being able to come to a clear definition of what 6e is, except, of course, the fact that it's not. And what is 6e? It doesn't matter. We're going to keep changing it. Whatever. 5e was sexy. Yeah, I liked 5e. 5e was fine. It was perfect. It was like going home. It was like a breath of fresh water. They had just continued with the thinking pattern of those first. Well, basically, once they fired Mike Merles, 5e was doomed. Once they allowed Jeremy Crawford to speak for the public, D&D was doomed. So that brings us up to today. Cycling back. Financially, was 5th edition a success or a failure? It was till it wasn't. It ends 2024 being a financial failure because Wizards of the Coast somehow lost $1 billion and blame it on 5e. 6th edition Player's Handbook is the biggest selling book they've ever made, as far as you know. It definitely sold more than 5e, but then, of course, we broke Street Day, made 3,000 copies available almost a month ahead of time, and gave copies to retailers 2 weeks before they were supposed to be given to retailers and allowed them to sell them. And even though those individual retailers might get in trouble for breaking Street Date, we didn't break Street Date. We just sent it to them. So financially, ends up being a failure. Popularity-wise, changing the face of the hobby, bad or good, doesn't matter. For every person that tells you it was awful, there's 2 people who will tell you it was amazing, and this is the best point D&D has ever been. I'm going to say success. We wouldn't have 6e without 5e. But 5e owes its success to several single things. Without Stranger Things, without Critical Role, without the internet, without COVID, 5e would have gone meh, right? We would have broke even at best. Without Wizards of the Coast being stupid, without Wizards of the Coast not understanding their fan base, without Wizards of the Coast saying dumb shit and allowing idiots like Kyle Brink and Mackenzie DeArms to be their representatives, to continue to allow Jeremy Crawford, it might have done better, but no, because Wizards of the Coast is its own worst enemy. It somehow manages to completely forget the past, constantly create a new future, and then ignore what it just said 5 minutes ago. Is Wizards of the Coast lying about AI? Yeah. Does anybody care at this point? No. Even Wizards of the Coast is like, fuck it, we're using AI. Is 6e going to be bigger than 5e? Absolutely not. 5 years from now, 6e will be seen as a failure compared to 5e. There's no way 6e can be as popular as 5e because there's no way the same events can happen. There's nothing Wizards can do that can duplicate COVID, Stranger Things, Critical Role, all happening in about the same time. And every choice Wizards of the Coast is making for 6e, like this one, might make sense on paper, but in the long run, no. Especially with so many competitors doing the exact same thing better for less money. Why would I give you money for 6e when I can still support the hobby I love by buying 5e product from Kobold Press, by buying 4e product from DM's Guide, by buying 3e products from DM's Guild, by buying OGL retro clone product that supports first edition, second edition, third edition, and even fourth edition, and all the 5,000 copies of various versions of OGL, D20, TSR, D&D, old school, right? I don't need 6E. You've told me I don't need 6E. One of your major selling points was you don't need 6E because it's backwards compatible. Hashtag, no, it's not. And in telling us we don't need 6E, you've pissed off the 5E players. You've pissed off the Adventurers Guild. You've pissed off the retailers. You've pissed off Gamma. You've pissed off an entire population, an entire culture built around 5E, good or bad, who are now looking at 6E going, why do I need to buy this? A year from now, if we look at the money, it will no way equal what 5E made this time, you know, in 2015. 5 years from now, when we're looking at Q1 numbers in, I don't know, 2030, it's like something's going to happen in 2027 that will affect 2028, 2009, and 2030. It's like they came out in 2020 and told us what the battle plan was leading up to 2030 and the future for Wizards of the Coast, and Hasbro doesn't need Wizards of the Coast. Let's face it, motherfuckers, Hasbro doesn't need you. Hasbro is setting Wizards of the Coast up to fail. Hasbro doesn't need Wizards of the Coast. They have been very clear about that. D&D is a brand. It is not a game. D&D will make us more money digital than it ever did physical. The only way D&D can make money going forward is if we merchandise the IP. It's a lifestyle. It's not a game. It's a digital empire. It's not a physical role-playing game. Plus all the bullshit about the virtue signaling, about the false history of all the, racism, sexism, just zombie, blah, 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 that we've talked about ad infinitum, right? So yeah, Hasbro knows it's going to fail. Hasbro just has to make up the money they lost on E1, make up that $1 billion, and continue to show a certain line to make shareholders like myself continue to feel like my money is being handled well, which so far we don't feel like that. So Hasbro's got to be thinking about that. Oh, we fucked up Power Rangers. How the fuck do you fuck up Power Rangers? We fucked up Magic. How the fuck do you fuck up Magic? We fucked up Transformers. How do you fuck up Transformers in its 40th anniversary? What do we need to do to make up for that? Well, I don't know. It certainly ain't 6th edition. We could tell a few lies about 6th edition. We could continue to allow Wizards of the Coast to be our stalking horse. Any publicly bad thing, Wizards of the Coast. Any publicly good thing, Hasbro. Who released the Dungeons and Dragons movie? Hasbro. Whose name is not mentioned anywhere in the credits for the Dungeons and Dragons movies? Gary Gygax and Wizards of the Coast. At the end of the day, boys and girls, if you want to continue to play 5e, there are hundreds of third-party products out there that are as good, if not better than anything Wizards made. So you can continue to play 5e for centuries without ever having to put down a dime for 6e. And if you're an old school player who prefers 1e, 2e, 3e, 3.5, 4, Holmes, Osric, all the other 20 billion variations of the TSR, third edition D&D, well, I assure you, you can continue to play that forever because there are so many retro clones and so many games and sub games and things feeding off the retro clones. Fuck Shadow Dark alone. Right? Not to mention Brandon Sanderson's $10 million Stormlight thingy, which, nobody will play, but still. So RPG Pundit asked at the beginning of this 35-minute long rant, God, I'm sorry, 5e, was it a failure? Publicly, no. Financially, yes. Will 5e be a success 5 years from now? Absolutely. 5e, money, publicity, impact in a bottle. 6e, money, publicity, impact in a bottle. The 5e bottle will end up being so much more than the 6e will ever be. It is only downhill for Wizards. There is nothing they could do to equal the series of events that allowed 5e to be 5e. And there's nothing that they can do to pull themselves out of this flaming trash heap disaster that they seem hell-bent on putting themselves in. And Hasbro is encouraging them. Please continue to hemorrhage money, Wizards of the Coast, so we can better explain why we sold you off, why we're slowly piecing you off, why we're slowly giving the IP to other companies, why we're telling people digital, not audio. So hopefully I answered your question, RPG Pundit. Thanks for sticking with me for 35 minutes, guys. This is, I could talk for this about hours. I'm sorry. It's just, it hits home to all of us. But at the end of the day, here we go. At the end of the day, it's coming. At the end of the day, all you can do is take a deep breath, right? You know what I'm building up for here, right? Take a deep breath. Shrug your shoulders and say it with me. That's so Wizards!
Laughing aloud now, magic in the air. Wands roll around us, cast away our care. Friends in the hallways, adventures we find. Spells and enchantments, trouble on our mind. That's so Wizards.